Welcome to Chess, ladies and gentlemen. Hey, man, I know y'all are ready for the chess, man. You ain't even got to tell me. I got you. So, you know what? I went ahead and took a little side step. So I wanted to try to, do a game, that probably has a lot of hype behind it. Because it is very possible that we might see Hans Niemann and Magnus Carlsen play yet again. You know, the two best friends of chess, right? So this is the semifinal game between Fabiano Caruana and Hans Moke Niemann. So let's see if the chess speaks for itself. This is the semifinal round. This is game number 1 that they played between each other. They're trying to see who is going to advance further and see what's cracking. All my people in the Philippines, I will say maraming salamat. Of course, mabuhay to you guys. Anybody else from around the world, I appreciate you guys very much. But if you guys are ready to go, let's take a look, see what we got for this game, son. All right, man, so we have the move A4. Do not try this at home. Now, you guys heard me say before, maybe if you haven't watched my video yet, it is definitely good to push pawns that are supported by a rook when you're playing Chess960. And to mention that as well, this is position number 555. So, like as you guys probably know, there's 960 different possible variations. So this is 555. Yes. So we do start the game, like I said, with the move A4. It's not the absolute best because, yeah, you are throwing out a wing pawn, one of these rook pawns, and that's not ideally where you want to, develop pieces. Usually it's going to be one of these 4 pawns right here. Definitely another move was actually G4. G4 did a couple things. I mean, it let the bishop out, let the queen out. I mean, it got some support from the rook. So that's definitely a way to start the game. But like I said, we do see A4, which doesn't completely damage your position, but yes, we do see the move D5, a nice principled central move, and then we do see the move G3. And like I said, G4 was definitely ideal, just gaining as much space as humanly possible. And maybe you might have something like so, and you are getting as much space as you possibly can. But we do see the move G3. We got bishop to C6, simply defending the pawn on D5. We do see the move D4. And this has a couple different ideas behind it. Number 1, you don't really want this pawn to move. You want to try to keep it as back as possible, and maybe it can be a target. You also are trying to blunt this bishop here as well. We do see the move G6, attacking that pawn immediately, and then we do see E3, and everything is protected. You see that both players have, they're trying to maximize their pieces. They're trying to go after opponents' pieces, defend their pieces. It's all regular, normal chess stuff. We do see the move E5, pawn takes E5. We got bishop taking E5, and then we do have the really nice knight B to C3. We do see the move D4. We got knight up to D5. So we have managed to get this knight out onto a relatively normal square. And then now we have knight to D5. And this is nice. If we can get this queen somewhere else, you might kind of see some knight to E7 checks. And that actually becomes relevant later. We'll talk about it. But we do see the move knight to A6. We got pawn taking D4, bishop taking D4. And then we have the nice queen to Z4. And this is highly logical, man. If you look at the position, you're looking at black's position like, hey, man, what does black have in their position that I can, try to, mess with a little bit? And it is this undefended bishop on D4. So queen to C4 makes a lot of sense. But to defend, we do see queen to C5, and this does kind of force the situation because not only are you defending your bishop, you are double hitting this knight right here like so. So you really don't have anything better to do than to trade. So we do see queen taking C5, bishop taking C5, and then we do see knight 1 to E3. And, the knights are just working together. So you see that, I mean, even though you kind of start with a random position, you still have a lot of ideas that you remember from regular chess that you can carry over. Knights definitely do best by, kind of taking care of each other. We do in the game actually see bishop taking E3 and then pawn taking E3. And then the knight on D5 is held by this bishop. But, if we just so happen to see something like bishop taking D5, this would be one example of, the knight kind of taking care of the other knight. So we would be seeing this. But like I said, we did see pawn taking E5 here. And one of the things that I will say about white's position is they do have this bishop here. The position is actually quite a bit open. So you kind of have a little bit of a superior situation, if you are Fabiano Caruana here. We do see rook going to e8, seeing if we can go bishop takes d5, and then bishop takes d5, and then rook takes e3, get a pawn. But we do see the move e4. We got knight down to c5, double hitting this pawn. So we got to try to find some counterplay. We do see bishop going to b4, which might kind of seem like all it's doing is hitting this knight right here, but it is actually x-raying through to try to give you some counterplay because, you know, black is basically going to be taking this pawn at some point. We do see that immediately, and then, like I said, we do see knight to e7 with check, and this does take care of this, you know, pretty nicely placed bishop here. So we do see king coming down to d7, bishop takes e4, bishop takes e4, and then we do see long castles by Fabiano. And I mean, this is a very, very nice position if you are white here. Just looking at the difference in the position, you know, you do kind of have a somewhat active rook right here, but this knight is not really doing much at the moment, and this rook is not really doing much in the corner, and really kind of your champion piece is this bishop. So, you know, white is definitely much further ahead than black. They are down a pawn at the moment, but they have very, very active pieces, and they can definitely produce some threats. The king cannot go this way, so either you move this bishop in a way, which is like literal suicide, you know, or you move king down to e6, which is what we see in the game. After the king goes to e6, we do see knight down to d5, and there is a really, really big threat of knight takes c7, and this is a family reunion fork. No, it's just called a family fork, but I threw reunion in there anyway, man. So this is a really, really huge threat. So we need to try to, you know, defend that some kind of way. I will say this, though. You do kind of have to be a little bit careful simply because if you capture here like this rook is undefended behind this king. So there are a lot of ideas of like a rook going over to e1 and just simply winning the rook that is back behind there. Or, you know, winning this bishop also. So there's a lot of threats. So, you know, taking right here is not absolutely super advisable. So we do just simply have rook to c8, making sure that we defend the position a little bit so there's no more checks now. But we have actually reached a point in the game. There is a really, really nice and crazy subtle move that Fabiano can play in this position here. He is +2 if he can find this move. If you want to go ahead and try to see what that move is, go ahead and do so. Okay, so, yes. The move, we didn't see this move in the game. We saw a very, very logical move. We saw knight to f4 with check in the game, and that slides the king over, and then we saw rook g going to e1, and you see those rooks are really, really powerful on the D and E file. But going back to the position, the move that I was looking for is bishop to c3. Now, the thing about this situation is this bishop is cutting off the king. This knight is really doing a great job with cutting off the king also. You know, the king can't really move because you're going to be looking at this, and then the knight, the rook is going to go bye-bye. The problem is the king is actually kind of stuck in the middle of the board right here. You know, you have this rook coming in. This rook is already on the D file. So, you know, you have kind of a very, very dire situation if black plays like this. The absolute best thing to do in this position is to recognize that your bishop is a little bit loose and to go the move f5 and allow knight to f6, which hits both of these pieces. You're going to defend the rook because the bishop is already defended by the pawn, but this is kind of the way that you have to play. If not, if after bishop to c5, you just said, hey man, I'm going to take this knight right here and it's going to be an even trade, it's absolutely not an even trade. You would be looking at rook g to e1 with check. The king would go to d7. You would be looking at rook takes d5 first. Then the king would come down. You'd be looking at rook taking, the king taking, and then the highly, highly crucial move bishop to f6. And you are dropping some material, and you are going to be down like, you know, a nice amount of material if you are black. So this is not the way you want to play. But there wasn't a lot better. I mean, these were definitely the positions that you were going to get in, but we did not see that. Like I said, we did see, you know, all of the stuff where the knight checked, and then we had the rook g to e1. But I will say that white is still clearly better, though. You know, you kind of still have some issues with this knight and this rook not really having fully been in the game all the way. So black kind of has some unraveling to do. We do see knight to c6 kind of starting to unraveling. The bishop goes to c3 with check. We got king down to g5. We got the rook up to d7. Trying to be as active with the rook as humanly possible. And one of the things about this position is the bishop is holding this rook down here. So you don't really have, you know, a lot of worries at the moment. You do see bishop going to f5, rook takes f7, rook takes e1 with check, the bishop takes e1. You know, like I said, the bishop is saving the day. We got king down to g4, we got the rook taking h7, we got the rook over to e8, hitting the bishop on e1. We do see bishop going back to c3, and then we have the move g5, and I mean, G5 is actually really, really crafty because not only does it discover an attack on this rook, it is currently hitting the knight. And so the interesting thing is there's actually really kind of like 2 or 3 ways to get out of this if you want to try to, you know, kind of do that. One of the things, you know, centralizes around the idea if you move the knight to either one of these places, you will be following it up with f6, and that is going to be forking the rook and the king. So you're pretty much just going to be trading if the bishop takes here on h7. You also have what we saw in the game, which was rook to g7, and you're just simply pinning down that g5 pawn. You have saved your knight, and you have also saved your rook, so it's kind of like a two-for situation. So we do see rook going to e7, knight goes to d5. We do see rook taking g7, bishop taking g7, and then we do see king going down to h3. And like I was always telling you guys before, you know, when you're going into an endgame, I mean, the kings become very attacking pieces. So you see that the king is trying to make itself very useful by attacking this pawn here on h3 that cannot be defended at the moment. So we do see bishop going to h6, king takes h2. We got bishop taking g5, king takes g3. So you see the king has kind of, you know, wreaked a little bit of havoc over here on the king side. And now everything is simplified just on the queen side. So we have pawns on one side of the board, which makes end games very, you know, much easier to play when you have kings. We do see the move c3, restricting the knight from coming in. We do see bishop to e6, knight takes c7. We got bishop to b3, hitting the pawn. There really isn't anything you can do about it. We do see knight going to b5, bishop takes a4, knight goes down to d4. Knight takes, we got pawn taking, we got king going to g4, you know, hoping that, you know, Hans just says, hey, bro, you know, I don't like chess. The chess doesn't speak for itself. You know, I'm just going to drop my bishop for no reason, but we don't see that. We got bishop going to d2. We see king going up to f5, bishop to h6. We got king to e4. Bishop goes to g7. Bishop goes to b3. We do see bishop going to h8, bishop to d5, and then we do see bishop to g7. And it is in this position that the players agree to a draw. Now, if it is not completely clear to you why the game is a draw, basically what's going to happen is, I mean, the king is going to be trying to always oppose this king. This bishop is pretty much going to maintain this diagonal or kind of something like this. Just make sure that it's heavily influencing the square in front of the pawn, especially if the king moves somewhere else. You know, and there's really just not any progress that either side is really going to be able to make. If we go back, after bishop came to b3, you know, there was an alternate way you could have tried to play. There's many different ways you could try to play this position. But let's say you're saying, hey, man, I don't want to move my bishop. Let me just go and start moving my king. So king to d2, man. I'm trying to see if maybe I can kind of get around this d pawn and try to, like, force it home. One of the problems that you have is you don't have free reign on this c file because this pawn right here specifically is really kind of, you know, preventing, you know, from penetrating and kind of like, you know, sheltering your pawn to the promised land. So we do see bishop e6. We would probably see king to c3. The king would go to d5, king to b4. And you see that basically the king is constantly like shouldering, trying to keep, you know, white's king out of the scenario. We would be looking at king to a5, and then the bishop would go down to d5, king a4, bishop e6. So you see that we're still kind of repeating positions and stuff like that. So just to give you guys kind of a visual of what maybe it could have looked like an alternate way, I mean, you might be able to see something like that. But, you know, these pawns aren't really too much going to move from these dark squares because this bishop is reigning supreme on this diagonal right here. And I mean, you pretty much keep these pawns like this because this king can never really kind of penetrate. And then you're using this king to make sure that this king can't go any further. So there is nothing to be had. But like I was saying before, I mean, there definitely was, you know, a little bit into this position right here, you know, cutting the king off much further. So it would have definitely forced Hans to try to come up with some really creative defense. So there is that game. You know, they're playing the other game as we speak. So, you know, we're going to see, you know, who gets to advance. I know that Magnus Carlsen does not want to play Hans Niemann, you know, in a final situation because, you know, he's not really his favorite person, you know. But I mean, there's a lot of stuff surrounding Hans Niemann. You know, the controversy, the genes, all the different sagas that are going on. You know what I'm saying? There's some theories out there, man. I'm not gonna name them on this video. But yes, I appreciate everybody very much for stopping by. Maraming salamat aking makaibigan po sa nanonood ng aking mga video. Hello ulit. If you're coming from a long time ago and you're coming back and saying what's up, I appreciate you. And I'm going to catch you guys next time.